You move into your dream home, excited to settle into a peaceful neighborhood, until you realize you've got a nightmare neighbor. And not just any neighbor, an HOA Karen. The problem? Not loud parties, not messy yards, just a simple dog bath area. But for Karen, it's the ultimate crime. What happens next? Stick around, because this one is unbelievable. It all started with something completely harmless. A dog bath area. Nothing fancy, nothing extravagant, just a small practical setup in the homeowner's side yard. Anyone with a pet knows the struggle. Muddy paws tracking dirt into the house, the hassle of washing a dog in a tiny bathroom, or dealing with a soaked backyard after every bath. So, when Mark, let's call him that, moved into his new home, he thought he had the perfect solution. Mark was a proud owner of a golden retriever named Max, a friendly and playful dog who loved the outdoors. But with the unpredictable weather and Max's habit of diving into every puddle he could find, cleaning him up had become a never-ending battle. The answer? A small, well-designed dog washing station in his yard. Mark wasn't the type to ignore HOA rules. In fact, before making any changes to his home, he did his research. He checked the HOA handbook, scrolled through the community's online forums, and even had a chat with a board member. No restrictions on pet washing areas. As long as it wasn't an eyesore or causing damage, he was good to go. So, he got to work. The setup was simple but effective. A small concrete pad to keep things dry, a waist-high hose attachment, and a drainage system that directed water properly into the ground. No mess, no standing water, no reason for anyone to complain. To keep things neat, he even added a privacy screen to make sure it didn't interfere with the look of the neighborhood. His neighbors seemed fine with it. In fact, a few even complimented the idea. "That's smart," one said. "Wish I had one for my dog," another joked. It seemed like everyone saw it for what it was, a practical and harmless addition to Mark's home. Everyone except her. The first time Mark saw Karen, he didn't think much of it. She lived right next door, in a house that was perfectly manicured, almost like something out of a catalog. Not a blade of grass out of place, not a single weed in sight. It was clear she took the HOA rules seriously. Karen wasn't exactly warm. She had a reputation for enforcing the community rules, sometimes more aggressively than the HOA itself. She was the type to take pictures of Christmas lights left up a day too long or measure the height of people's grass with a ruler. People avoided her when they could, but Mark figured as long as he followed the rules, he had nothing to worry about. He was wrong. It started with a look, one of those long disapproving stares from across the fence. Mark noticed it the first time he used the dog bath station. Karen had stepped outside, crossed her arms, and watched as if he was committing some horrific crime against the neighborhood. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe she was just curious. Maybe she was having a bad day. But then, it happened again and again. Anytime Mark used the dog bath, Karen would appear, sometimes on her porch, sometimes near the fence, always watching. Not once did she say a word, just a silent, judging presence that made it very clear she did not approve. Then, one day, she finally spoke. Mark was finishing up Max's bath when he heard it. Karen's voice, sharp and matter-of-fact. "Excuse me," she called out, stepping closer to the fence. "That's not allowed, you know." Mark turned, caught off guard. "Sorry, what's not allowed?" "That," Karen gestured toward the dog washing station. "It's against HOA rules." Mark frowned. "Actually, I checked. There's nothing in the HOA guidelines that says I can't have this." Karen pursed her lips. "Well, it's an eyesore, and it's going to cause problems." Mark was confused. "Problems? How?" "Water runoff for one," she said, arms still crossed. "It's going to drain into my yard. And besides, this is a nice neighborhood. We don't need things like that ruining property values." Mark sighed. "The water drains properly. I made sure of that, and it's not visible from the street, so I don't think it's hurting anything." Karen wasn't satisfied. "I'll be talking to the HOA about this." She huffed before turning on her heel and marching back into her house. Mark watched her go, shaking his head. Was she serious? Over a dog bath? Unfortunately, she was just getting started. It only takes one complaint to turn a peaceful neighborhood into a battlefield. Mark thought he was just washing his dog, but his HOA Karen neighbor had other plans. The worst part? She wasn't just complaining. She was out for revenge. And this was only the beginning. Mark thought Karen was just bluffing when she stormed off that day. After all, what could she really do? There was no rule against his dog bath station. He had checked. He had even gone through the trouble of making sure it was neat, discreet, and functional. But Karen, she wasn't the type to let things go. And just a few days later, Mark found out exactly how far she was willing to go. It was a Thursday morning when he got the email from the HOA board. The subject line, "Neighborhood compliance violation. Immediate attention required." Mark's stomach dropped. He clicked on the email, half expecting a mistake. But there it was, in black and white. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that you have installed an unauthorized structure in your yard that may be in violation of the community guidelines. Specifically, a dog washing station that could be affecting drainage and neighborhood aesthetics. A formal complaint has been filed against this installation, and we request your response within 7 days. Mark read the email twice, then a third time. Unauthorized structure, affecting drainage. This had Karen written all over it. Mark decided to handle it the right way. No drama, no arguments, just facts. He sent back a polite but firm response. Dear HOA Board, I appreciate your concerns, but I want to clarify that my dog washing station is within HOA guidelines. There are no rules against pet washing areas, and I made sure the drainage does not interfere with any neighboring properties. If needed, I'm happy to provide photos and details of my setup for review. That should have been the end of it, right? Wrong. The next day, he got another email. A site visit has been scheduled for HOA inspection on Saturday morning. Please ensure access to the area in question so our compliance team can evaluate the concern. Mark sighed. Seriously? An inspection? Over a dog bath? Saturday morning rolled around, and sure enough, the HOA compliance officer showed up right on time. He was an older guy named Greg, wearing khakis and a polo with the HOA logo embroidered on it. He had a clipboard, a measuring tape, and a look that said, I'd rather be anywhere but here. Morning, Greg greeted. Just here to take a look at the issue. Mark nodded, leading him over to the dog bath station. No problem. I don't really see what the issue is, but go ahead. As Greg started jotting down notes, Mark felt eyes on him. Sure enough, Karen was watching. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, lips pursed, watching the inspection like a hawk. Mark almost expected her to take out a notebook and start writing things down herself. Greg walked around the station, measured the distance from the fence, checked the water flow, and even tested the drainage. He nodded approvingly. This is actually pretty well done. Where's the complaint coming from? Mark just jerked his head toward Karen's house. Take a wild guess. Greg sighed, already looking exhausted. Figures. Just as Greg was wrapping up, Karen made her move. She strutted over, fake smile plastered on her face. Hello, Greg. I just wanted to make sure you're checking everything properly. I have a few concerns. Greg forced a smile. Good morning, Karen. We're just finishing up here. Karen wasn't having it. Oh, well, I just want to make sure you're aware of the water runoff issue. My yard is right next to this, and I don't want flooding every time he washes that dog. Mark crossed his arms. It's not causing flooding, Karen. The drainage is built in, no standing water. Karen ignored him, turning back to Greg. And, of course, there's the matter of the appearance. This is a nice neighborhood, Greg. We can't just have people installing whatever they want, can we? Greg sighed. Karen, I understand your concerns, but I don't see any rule violations here. The drainage is properly directed, and there's no evidence of flooding. Karen's smile twitched. So you're saying anyone can just build whatever they want now? Greg shook his head. No, but this doesn't break any community rules. Karen's face turned red. Well, I'll have to escalate this matter further. Mark couldn't help but laugh. Escalate to who, Karen? The HOA Supreme Court? Karen huffed, turning on her heel. We'll see about this. Greg looked at Mark with an apologetic shrug. I'll file my report, but honestly, you're in the clear. Mark exhaled, relieved. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. But he knew this wasn't the end. Not with Karen. She wasn't going to let it go that easily. And Mark? He was about to find out just how far she was willing to go. You'd think an HOA investigation would be reserved for major violations, like illegal construction or disruptive behavior. But no, in this case, an HOA Karen had them investigating. A dog bath station. And trust me, she wasn't going to stop until she got her way. But what happens when the HOA gets involved? Stick around, because things are about to get messy. Mark knew Karen wasn't the type to give up easily. After the failed inspection, she had stormed back into her house, probably already typing up her next complaint. But even he didn't expect what came next. A week later, another email arrived. Subject: HOA Review Panel. Mandatory homeowner discussion. Mark let out a groan. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered as he opened the message. Dear homeowner, due to continued concerns from a fellow resident, your recent property modification is now under review by the HOA Compliance Panel. We require your presence at the next HOA meeting to discuss this matter further. Failure to attend may result in further action. Further action? Over a dog bath? Mark ran a hand over his face. Karen wasn't just complaining anymore. She was escalating. It wasn't long before word started to spread. Mark was outside watering his plants when his neighbor, Lisa, wandered over. Hey, I heard through the grapevine that Karen is trying to get your dog bath banned. Mark chuckled. Apparently, she's got the HOA dragging me into some review panel over it. Lisa rolled her eyes. That woman has too much time on her hands. You know she once tried to get my patio furniture removed because it was too modern? Mark laughed. That tracks. But while he could joke about it, he also knew that HOA meetings weren't just a formality. If Karen pushed hard enough, she could convince the board to create a new rule, one that could force him to remove the dog bath completely. When Mark arrived at the HOA meeting, he wasn't surprised to see Karen already there, sitting front and center like she owned the place. The panel consisted of 5 board members, all looking half bored but somewhat intrigued by the so-called issue at hand. At the head of the table sat Jeff, the HOA president, a guy in his 50s who had the perpetual look of someone who regretted signing up for this job. All right, let's get started, Jeff said, rubbing his temples. We're here to discuss the recent complaint regarding an unapproved exterior modification. Karen, since you filed the complaint, you have the floor. Karen stood up dramatically, as if she were presenting a Supreme Court case. Thank you, Jeff. As you all know, we work hard to keep this neighborhood looking its best, and that means following rules. Unfortunately, some homeowners, she cast a pointed glance at Mark, think they can bypass those rules and install whatever they please, without considering how it affects the rest of us. Mark exhaled sharply. Here we go. Karen continued, now waving around a stack of printed photos. This dog washing station is not only an eyesore, but it is also a potential hazard. Water runoff could lead to soil erosion. Standing water could attract pests. And let's not forget, it's setting a dangerous precedent. If we allow this, what's next? Outdoor showers? Unapproved plumbing modifications? Mark couldn't help but smirk. She was acting like he built a full-blown car wash. Jeff cleared his throat. All right, Mark, let's hear your side. Mark stood up calmly. Thanks, Jeff. First of all, I appreciate the HOA's dedication to keeping the neighborhood looking great. That's why I made sure my dog bath was neat, properly installed, and within HOA guidelines. He turned to Karen. Karen keeps calling it an unapproved modification. But here's the thing. There's nothing in the HOA rulebook that says I can't have it. In fact, I even had an HOA rep inspect it. No violations were found. A few board members nodded. Jeff flipped through the documents in front of him. That's true. The compliance officer reported that the setup meets drainage requirements and is not a structural hazard. Karen's face twitched. But it's still a nuisance. I have to look at it every day. Lisa, who had also attended the meeting, spoke up from the back. Karen, you can't even see it from your house unless you walk to the fence? Karen whipped around. Excuse me, Lisa, but this is not your concern. Jeff held up his hand. All right, let's keep this civil. Karen wasn't done. What about property values? This is a high-end community, Jeff. Do we really want people installing whatever they want in their yards? One of the board members, Susan, tapped her pen on the table. Actually, Karen, I looked into this. Home values are affected by larger issues, like poorly maintained homes, excessive noise, or serious structural violations. A pet washing station? That's not going to tank anyone's home value. Karen's face turned bright red. Mark fought back a grin. This was not going the way she wanted. Jeff sighed, looking around the table. All right, unless anyone here has a legitimate rule violation to bring up, I don't see a reason to penalize Mark for his pet washing station. Silence. Then, reluctantly, Karen sat back down, arms crossed, fuming. Jeff continued. We'll consider this matter closed unless new evidence arises. Mark, you're free to keep your dog bath. Mark exhaled in relief. But Karen, she looked ready to explode. As the meeting wrapped up, Mark couldn't resist. As he passed Karen, he gave her a small smile. Guess we'll both just have to live with it, huh, Karen? Her eyes narrowed. This isn't over. And Mark knew. She meant it. Most people would let it go after losing an HOA complaint. But not Karen. No, she wasn't just upset. She was out for revenge. And when an HOA Karen wants to make your life miserable, trust me, she'll stop at nothing. Buckle up, because things are about to get a whole lot worse. At first, Mark thought maybe, just maybe, Karen had given up. For a few days after the HOA meeting, things were quiet. No emails, no surprise inspections, no passive-aggressive glares from her porch. It was almost too quiet. Mark even started to relax. Guess she finally accepted defeat, he muttered to himself as he hosed off his driveway one afternoon. He should have known better. The first sign of trouble came that night. Mark had just settled in to watch TV when his doorbell rang aggressively. Not once, but over and over again. What the? He groaned, standing up and heading for the door. When he opened it, there was no one there. Just an empty porch and the distant sound of someone hurrying away. Mark stepped out, looking around. The street was dark. but he had a feeling he knew exactly who was behind it. The next morning, Mark woke up to a bright orange HOA notice stuck to his front door. Violation notice. Unsightly property. Please address immediately. Mark frowned. What unsightly property? His yard was well maintained. His trash bins were stored properly, and there was no junk anywhere. Then he saw it. His garbage cans were knocked over. Trash scattered all over his driveway. His stomach tightened. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this on purpose. And as much as he wanted to believe otherwise, he knew exactly who it was. Karen. She couldn't win with the HOA, so now she was playing dirty. He spent the next hour cleaning up, shaking his head. She's got nothing better to do, huh? But the harassment was just getting started. That same evening, Mark was finishing dinner when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello? Hi, this is Officer Daniels with the local police department. We received a noise complaint from your address. Neighbors are reporting loud music and excessive disturbance. Mark blinked. Wait, what? I've been inside all night. No loud music here. There was a pause before the officer sighed. You wouldn't happen to have issues with a certain neighbor, would you? Mark let out a short laugh. Let me guess. Karen? The officer chuckled. I can't disclose who made the call, but let's just say we've been getting a few similar complaints lately. All from the same person. Nothing to worry about, just wanted to check in. Mark shook his head in disbelief. This woman was really calling the cops over fake noise complaints? Thanks, officer, Mark sighed. Sorry for the trouble. No worries, the cop said. Between you and me, we get these kinds of Karen cases more often than you'd think. Mark hung up, shaking his head. This was getting ridiculous. After that, the petty revenge only escalated. Mysterious HOA complaints. Mark started getting weekly violation notices. His lawn was too long. It wasn't. His mailbox was crooked. It was perfectly straight. And his porch light was too bright. It was HOA approved. Weird deliveries. One morning, a pizza delivery guy showed up at Mark's house with 5 large pizzas. Paid in cash, under your name, the guy said. Mark hadn't ordered anything. Karen's doing, no doubt. Random car trouble. A few times, Mark came outside to find mysterious scratches on his truck. He couldn't prove it was Karen, but at this point, it was way too coincidental. One evening, Lisa walked over while Mark was fixing his garbage cans. Karen's been extra unhinged lately, she said, glancing toward Karen's house. Mark sighed. Yeah, and the worst part? She's smart about it. Just enough to annoy me, but not enough to get caught. Lisa smirked. You know, we could always fight fire with fire. Mark raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? Lisa just grinned. Oh, you'll see. Karen thought she was untouchable, but Mark, he was about to turn the tables.